My name is Nicole, and today I'll be talking about nonverbal communication. So, a short history of nonverbal communication. Humans didn't develop the capability to use vocal language for thousands of years. Instead, they relied on nonverbal communication, such as grunting, moaning, pointing, and other hand signals and gestures. And so the definition of nonverbal communication is a process of generating meaning using behavior other than words. Nonverbal communication and verbal communication act in conjunction as part of the same system rather than as opposites like most people would think. So what does this mean? Basically what this means is that people will listen to the words you're saying while also watching your body language. So if you have your arms crossed like this, even if what you're saying might be open to what the other person is saying, your body language is telling the other person that you are not open to their opinions or what they're saying. Now, if you have your arms relaxed on your leg or by your side, you're telling them that you are open and ready to be an effective listener. So examples of nonverbal communication. Body language, like we talked about, that would include gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, etc. There's another form of nonverbal communication called paralanguage, which is a vocal form of nonverbal communication, and that would include your pitch of your voice, the volume of your voice, your speaking rate, and your tone of voice, and other things too. So with pitch, there's something called the customer service voice, and typically that means that someone's voice will go up by 1 octave when they're talking to customers. So if I was at work right now, this is my regular speaking voice, but if I was at work, it might sound something more like this. Hi, thank you so much for using DoorDash. Your food is at your door, and you are all set to go. Have a great night. So you can see there how my pitch changed, my speaking rate changed, the volume and the tone of my voice changed. So the primary function of nonverbal communication is to convey meaning by reinforcing, substituting for, or contradicting verbal communication. So a good example of contradicting verbal communication would be mixed messages. Mixed messages are when you say something but really mean something else. So for example, you could jokingly or teasingly say to someone, I hate you. And they may take that okay if they know you really well and know your sense of humor, but more often than not, it can lead to confusion, frustration, and possibly even a discontinuation of the entire interaction. So some nonverbal communication has the same or very similar meaning across cultures. So I'm sure everyone knows like waving to say hi here. In other cultures, that is actually considered offensive. So it's interesting how, some of them are similar and some of them are complete opposites. About 65% of our meaning comes from nonverbal communication. So what that means is that people get 65% of what we're trying to convey through our body language and 45% of what we're trying to convey through the actual words we're speaking. So an example of that would be when someone asks you a question and you're not sure of their motive for asking that question, we're going to look closer into body language to fill in the meaning. So if someone says, what are you doing tonight? And they say it just like that, we might think, okay, they could be asking because they're just curious. They could be asking because they want to perhaps have company, which would be you. Or they could be asking maybe snarkily or even kind of like, well, what are you doing tonight? In that kind of tone of voice. Many nonverbal symbols do not have one specific meaning, making them rather ambiguous. So again, going back to that example of across the different cultures, here you can, flip someone off with your middle finger if you're angry. In other cultures, it means the same thing. And in other cultures, it means something completely different, and it's not actually offensive at all. So that's how it makes it a little bit ambiguous. Hand movements and other gestures can show someone something they're unfamiliar with in a way that words can't. So you can, for example, if you're trying to describe the size of a specific item, for example, you might say it's, about this long and this high, and you would use your hands to show them that. Another example is, if someone is walking towards you and you don't want them to come any closer, you might put up a hand and say stop, just like that. Also, facial expressions can reinforce the emotion we convey through words. So, for example, let's say someone is going through a breakup. They might wince or frown when the other person is talked about or mentioned by name, which would show us that A, we probably shouldn't be mentioning the person, but B, more importantly, that there's either some hurt or some anger towards that person still. So nonverbal communication is usually involuntary. It's a lot easier to fake emotions for a short period of time. So for example, you could fake that you're happy for a short period of time. It does become more difficult the longer you're around a specific person, because our true thoughts and feelings tend to leak out through nonverbal cues. So even though we might say, I'm fine, you would hear the pitch of my voice and you would look at my body language to see if I really mean I'm fine or if I'm just saying I'm fine. It can be very helpful in certain circumstances, and it can also be hurtful in others. So for example, a helpful situation, let's say you're at a crowded bar, and you can't really hear other people talking because the music is too loud and everybody else is talking, and you want to leave. You might tap your friend on the shoulder and then point towards the exit, and that would indicate to that other person that you want to leave. And because the actual nature of language is symbolic and abstract, and nonverbal communication is even more so, it can lead to some serious misunderstandings and arguments. Because our body language and nonverbal cues can completely change the tone of a conversation from bad to good or good to bad. So for example, if you start off a conversation with your arms crossed like this and you're very angry, and then as the conversation moves along, you kind of open up your body language, it shows the other person that you're perhaps more receptive to what they're saying, and it can turn a conversation from bad to good. So there's that. So nonverbal communication and credibility. People put more credibility into nonverbal communication than verbal communication because we put more trust into what people do rather than what they say. Have you ever heard the saying, say what you mean and mean what you say? This saying perfectly sums up how people are. It shows that people tend to mess up what they wanted to say or say it in a way that is offensive to the other party. So I know that people have always been in situations where I like to call it word vomit, where you say something that you didn't mean to say or shouldn't have been said. And that's why people put more trust into actions than words. So to sum it all up, humans have used nonverbal language since the beginning of time. Verbal and nonverbal communication are part of the same system and work in tandem. The primary function of nonverbal communication is to convey meaning when words cannot. It is involuntary for the most part. It can be helpful or hurtful to our relationships. And last, but certainly not least, nonverbal communication is more credible than verbal communication. Thank you for joining me, and you have a great day.